one and only Carl Jha. Carl, man, thank you for joining me, man. I always appreciate the conversations with you. We're going to get into the APEC summit with China and the conversation that took place between Joe Biden and China on the sidelines. But just to introduce you, Carl Jha is host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha, and you can follow his podcast on Twitter. On Twitter at Carl Jha, and follow the podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk In, and subscribe and support their podcast on Patreon at Silk and Steel. Carl, man, thank you for joining me. How you doing this morning? You doing all right?
I'm doing great. Well, it's actually my evening time. We're flipped. We're 13 hours apart. So
we are indeed 13 hours apart. I'm sorry. I always get that wrong when I bring people on this American-centric point of view. But no, man, thank you for joining me. I do appreciate it. I saw that Joe Biden. Now, I want to show you this. This is where we are today with our president. It is not the most glorious thing in the world. It's kind of humiliating, actually, when you think about it. But the leader of the free world gets ignored in a photo shoot. And apparently he gets there late and everyone just leaves. Look at this. This is astonishing. So this is C-SPAN. All of the leaders, they take their picture. Biden's not here. And what you hear is all of these reporters screaming, and they're effectively saying, wait a minute, the leader of the free world is not there yet. The leader of the free world is not there. And instead of them waiting, they just mosey on and leave. That's where we are today. They don't even wait for the president of the US to show up to a photo shoot of world leaders at the G20. Just astonishing. Carl, are we looking at, oh, you guys can't see it. I'm sorry. There we are. Carl, are we looking at a changeover in the way that the world considers US leadership? I've never seen a situation like this. I mean, they are literally leaving a photo shoot that is supposed to be of all the world leaders, and they didn't wait or even seem to care that Joe Biden was not there. That's just astonishing.
To be honest, Jamal, I don't think Joe Biden even knows. I don't think Joe Biden himself even knows.
I have never seen anything like this. There's Xi Jinping. We saw MBS. He's back there. And the reporter is like screaming. They're like, wait a minute. The president is not there. The president is not there. And they just mosey on along. Just astonishing stuff.
The president hasn't been there for a long time, Jamar.
That is true.
It's been a walking zombie for 4 years, and now he's a walking zombie on his way out. Who cares?
Lame duck.
And I mean, it gets even more ridiculous because this at the recent meeting in Apex meeting in Peru, China just inaugurated a $3.5 billion megaport that will be China's logistic hub for all of South America. It will shape the shipping from Brazil to Shanghai by 15 days. This is a big deal. And then not to be outdone, we have Tony Blinken the next day delivering a speech where he said the U.S. will pledge support to build a passenger railway line for Lima, the capital of Peru. Sounds good, right? Sounds really good until you dig into the details. And then you realize what he's really talking about is the Caltrans has just recently electrified their lines. So they have a bunch of obsolete old diesel engine rail cars they need to get rid of. So they sold them to Peru for $6 million. So this is what Blinken is billing as a win. I mean, how does that even compare to what China has done? I mean, we're talking about magnitude differences here. First of all, first, U.S. did not help Lima build a rail line. They just sold a bunch of old, obsolete rail cars for $6 million. And then China built this 3.5 billion megaport and $1 billion of investment on top of it. It does not. That will transform the whole landscape of how commerce is done in in South America.
No.
U.S. is a joke right now. I mean, when they do things like this, why should anyone even pay attention what Biden is doing when he himself doesn't even know what he's
what's
doing?
wild about that? I saw Blinken's response, and I thought the exact same thing. Megaport. I mean, it's hard to get across how big this port is, and it basically allows China to ingratiate itself to South America. It makes this major allowance of trade relationships between South America and China. And what's wild about it too, China apparently has also allowed tariff-free goods to be imported into China from countries that are low economic yield countries. And again, this is massive if you're talking about Africa or even places in South America that don't necessarily have a huge amount of trade. Well, this is going to boost it significantly. And this port is going to be a gateway to doing so. And yeah, I saw Blinken's thing and I thought of it the same way. It's like China says, here's this megaport that we're releasing. And Blinken comes out, hey, we're also doing stuff in South America. Here's our thing that we're doing in South America. Okay, man, those things don't really compete with one another, but fair enough if that's what you need to do in order to not look bad. All of this is a weird face-saving mechanism that didn't really even need to take place. So what? China has made a major megaport and it's working with Peru and South America. Okay, great. Why do you need to add 2 cents into this to make it look like you're doing something too? Like, it comes across looking weak, not strong. And it doesn't come across as if you're saving face. It comes across as if somebody has done something great and you're yapping in the corner that you are also doing big stuff on the sidelines. It just comes across poorly as opposed to just saying, yeah, China did a megaport. Good job. It's just weird. It's insecure. It's very strange.
I mean, that has been the U.S. government for the past decades. You know, they repeatedly say we gotta forward deploy our military posture in East Asia to reinforce our credibility. We got to show our strength. Look, if you're a really strong person, if you're Mike Tyson, you don't need to go around the world and announce people how great you are. You don't need to go flex in front of every camera. Everyone know, oh my God, you're a great Mike Tyson. You don't need to even advertise yourself.
It's bizarre. It's like, I'm trying to think of a really good analogy. It's like somebody comes out and they do something big, whatever it is. I cured cancer. And then you have somebody else who's also in the field of medicine, very insecure, saying, yeah, but, we were able to infect mice with this bacteria. Aren't you also happy? And it's like, okay, dude, you don't need to tell me that. The guy that cured cancer. Give him his props. You don't need to necessarily try to chime in about something that you also did that doesn't quite compare because you're insecure about the fact that this guy was able to do something big. It's that part. It's these weird face-saving maneuvers that don't really save face, and if anything, highlight the fact that you've been somewhat outdone on this issue. What is this port in Peru going to mean for trade between China and South America? Because I would imagine the U.S. is going to feel some kind of way about it. And you would be shocked at some of the reporting here. Some of the reporting came out, it says something like China builds a base in the US's backyard. As if Peru belongs to America. Just like the way we think about this stuff is astonishing. What is this port going to mean between trade between not just Peru and China, but also South America and China?
The Chancay port is 6,000 kilometers away from U.S. and then because they consider that U.S. backyard. And this is actually pretty big for all of South America because on top, it's not just a megaport. There's also the oceanic transcontinental highway that connects Brazil's Amazonian region to the Pacific coast of Peru. So now all the goods from Northeast Brazil, previously they would take a roundabout way to either loop around the tip of South America to go into Pacific to China, or to go through the Caribbean, through the Panama Canal when there's traffic, they have to wait to pass through the Panama Canal, and then maybe go to port in Mexico and United States, and then put everything in container ship, then ship to Shanghai. Now they can just ship directly through from Brazil's Amazon on this cross-continental highway to ports in Peru, loaded on container. By the way, this port is fully automated. They have like fully automated cranes, and so the new Peruvian employee who got hired by the port authority, all they got to do is just sit in the air control room, work on through remote control of the whole port operation through the 5G network built by Huawei. And this is amazing stuff. And Peru, like the people in Peru, they said themselves, Peru used to be kind of the center of South America, whether from the Inca Empire days or the Spanish colonial era. Peru was the center. This port will help Peru to become the center hub again, because 40 to 60% of the traffic that's going to go through the Chancay port is going to come in from other countries like Bolivia, which doesn't have a port access, Brazil, Chile, and this is going to revitalize the economy of the whole region. The port is initially set to handle 1 million be able to handle 1 million ton container ship. Like the world's largest container ship will be able to park in this port. So this is huge. It shaves the whole traffic from northeast Brazil to Shanghai about 15 days. So, for like perishable goods, like especially agricultural products, which in South America is known for, now they have a new market in Shanghai. Just by the virtue of this new port and cutting the shaving off of the time in transit. So this is a big deal. This is a big deal, which makes Tony Blinken even more ridiculous.
Just think, if we didn't spend $10 trillion blowing up Afghanistan and Iraq, what we could have done with that money. Like, it kills me, man. Like, that is money that we just pissed away. And China is building megaports and infrastructure around the globe. I mean, it's not just here, it's also in Africa, where they've built all of this infrastructure and everything else, ingratiating themselves into those countries, not in a war way, but in an infrastructure, in a, we're building things way. I mean, it's just, God, I hate the way we use our resources. And I would imagine this also adds into the whole BRICS issue, right? I mean, whether it's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Belt and Road, they are creating pathways for their goods to get from point A to point B that cuts costs and makes it easier for those goods to move from point A to point B. I mean, this is not just a random thing. They're doing this with this notion of getting closer to these various countries around the globe. And it just so happened that Brazil is part of BRICS. And it just so happens that China is part of BRICS. And it just so happened that Brazil is in South America, and this port is opening in South America. I don't think it's random. I guess my point is, one of the interesting things about the European Union is that all of them are closely linked, meaning all of those countries are right beside each other. So it makes common sense for them to kind of work together. Same thing with America, Canada, and Mexico. Again, it makes sense. All of them are on the same continent, etc. The weirdness with BRICS was that these countries were spaced all around the world. Iran, Saudi Arabia, and then you get Brazil, South Africa, China, Russia. And so it's like, okay, well, all of these countries are so far apart. They're going to have different, let's say, spheres of influence and different things that they need. How does this work? Okay, and I think this port shows how it works. We are going to link all of these countries together by air, sea, and land routes. We're going to make this work. We're going to be working together in coordination with one another. And I would put to you that this port is one of the ways of doing that. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. I mean, I would imagine this had to be one of the things they were concerned about. Okay, we're far apart. How are we going to make this work in regards to trade? And basically, how are we going to be in close association, even though our geographical landmasses are far apart? And I guess this port is one of the answers to that question. But correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Well, first of all, BRICS is not a regional like a forum anymore. It's not like NAFTA, which is just North America. BRICS is now like all global. And what made BRICS is possible is actually U.S. interventionist foreign policy, because U.S. for the past decade has been sabotaging all the international institutions and forums that U.S. itself had helped to build after World War II. U.S. basically neutered UN. Like they kind of veto everything that criticized Israel. That they're rejecting the international court ruling on Israel. So all these international institutions that U.S. itself helped to build, now they're jettisoning it because they feel, okay, this no longer suit our needs, so it doesn't apply to us. The rule-based international order is for you, not for me. And this is why people are seeking alternatives. This is why people are turning to BRICS. And what China's Belt and Road Initiative is designed to do is build more interconnectivity all across the globe. U.S. positioned this way as, China is expanding its influence. Well, of course, every nation is trying to do the same, except U.S. do it through bombing and China do it through trade. And U.S. bombs, China builds almost became a cliche. It's a meme now. And this is why China were able to do it successfully, is because people want ports, people want roads, people want infrastructure.
Right.
And this is what China's proposed as a win-win solution. Go ahead.
No, please continue.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, BRICS originally came about as an acronym coined by Goldman Sachs to describe like emerging economy. It was like a gimmick for stock market, but it became a reality because of the U.S. foreign policy. It drove Russia and China and Iran together, and at the same time, China is powering the growth of a lot of the emerging economies like Brazil, like South Africa, because China is importing a lot. These are, many of these countries are commodity producers, and China imports a lot of commodities. Right. And Brazil in particular, because United States used to be one of the largest exporter of agricultural products, especially corn and soybean, to China. But because of the U.S. trade war on China, it's forcing China to look for alternative. And guess what? Brazil produce corn, soybean in large quantities. So now China is sourcing a lot of its agricultural needs from Brazil instead, because Brazil, unlike United States, is a friendly country. It's part of the BRICS. The same goes for other Argentinian, other South American countries. So this is a big difference between U.S. and Chinese approach, and also by building the global connectivity, it's a port. A port, it doesn't just say only Chinese ship can dock at this port. A port, it's connect everyone. Everyone can come and trade, and that is the whole point. Increasing global connectivity is good, whereas U.S. is doing opposite. U.S. now are trying to close down the borders. They're trying to raise the tariffs. They're trying to build the barrier, building the trade barrier, building the trade wall around United States and also its European allies. I call them vassal states, and that's why they're go ahead.
But it's weird, right? I mean, because I think what the U.S. is hitting its head on is that there's a contradiction between what is in its political interests versus what is in its economic interests. And what I mean by that is, for the longest time, we were fine with this notion of trading with China, getting the benefits from that trade with China. And while that was happening, China was getting stronger. I mean, it's like, okay, well, you're going to send all of these American companies into China. Fair enough. Those companies are going to make a ton of money. Fair enough. And just so happened, as they were making the money, China was also becoming a stronger political, economic, industrial power as they were making that money. And none of them had issues with it while they were reaping the benefits off of it. Somewhere along the way, the political branch was like, hey, China is becoming a much stronger country. They seem to be growing economically, industrially, and politically, and by virtue of that, militarily. We don't like that. And the rules that have allowed China in order to do that, those rules need to now change because they don't advantage us in a political sense. Okay, well, the horse is out the barn. It's too late. Now the political branch is like, okay, now we need to raise walls. We need to pass sanctions. We need to create tariffs. We need to somehow go after countries that are working with China in this way. And it's like, yeah, but the reason you guys were working with China is because there was an economic benefit for you doing so, meaning those corporations that give you all those tax, that gives you all the money and everything else, they benefited from that. The American public benefited with cheap goods. And now you're saying, okay, now we need to change this. Okay, yeah, that's please.
I think there are many layers of this onion, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yes, you're correct. Like US were fine with China making toys, making shoes, making even iPhones for United States. They're just leveraging the Chinese cheap labor force,
right,
to produce for America at a lower price. But in this process of globalization, the benefit is not distributed evenly. Right. When the iPhone is produced in China actually doesn't get too much of the iPhone profit. Most of the iPhone profit goes to Apple. Right. But Apple, the profit is not distributed to the rest of the Americans. It's distributed to the top Apple executives and the shareholders.
Right.
So, the 1%, 1% gets benefit from the globalization. And with a lot of Americans are getting left behind because the American manufacturing base is getting hollowed out. And people start noticing after a couple, 4 decades of this. U.S. started offshoring even before China opened up. This started back in the 70s. And after 40 years of hollowing out U.S. manufacturing base, now vast majority of Americans are not elite educated from Ivy League. They didn't have all these connections, old boys network to help or have their daddy's connection to put them into investment funds, etc. So many Americans are left behind, and this is a real problem. And this is where politicians also try to play the blame game. It's like, don't blame us and our Wall Street sponsors who actually
blame
put
China
yourself in this misery.
And it's like, how do you blame China for policy and policy that was made by lawmakers, and lawmakers being paid by companies to do that policy? They turn around and blame China for this. Oh, it's China's fault. How is it China's fault when it was your political leaders that made this particular policy, working with all of these corporations that were going to be advantaged by it? It's just outrageous. But that's the way they think. That's what they're trying to put the blame on. I'm curious on something else.
And
Joe Biden. Oh, go for it, please.
Yeah, sorry. On top of that, there's also Pentagon that's always had a hard boner for containing China. I mean, Pentagon was held in check for the longest time by the U.S. American business lobby, who want engagement because they want to continue to reap profit from China. And what happens in more recent years, there's kind of fracturing of the American business interests. If you look at the S&P 500, the most of the stock capitalization is going to all the big tech companies, right? Yeah. We're talking about Google, Apple, Facebook, etc. Well, among these, Google is not in China. Facebook is not in China. They have nothing to gain from China. On the other hand, Google, Google, Facebook, they're also very closely tied with American. They're part of the American military-industrial intelligence complex. Right. They're basically embedded with all the intelligence services. That Google have a lot of contract from the Pentagon, etc. So they have everything to gain from blocking out their Chinese competitors, like TikTok. TikTok is eating their lunch in social media. So, one of the campaign to kill TikTok in the United States actually majorly funded by Google and Facebook.
Yes,
because this is competition. Because China now has grown powerful enough; they're no longer just proxy labor force for U.S. multinationals. Right. They're having their own major brands like Huawei, like TikTok, that's able to compete internationally. This is why U.S. now coming down, to very hard on Huawei. They put the chip ban. The whole chip ban on China is to kill Huawei and to kill Huawei's phone business in particular. So there's a business competition because a lot and also EVs. Previously, American companies are making a lot of money in China. Like my cousin, his first car in China was Buick. Buick was big brand in China, and GM was making more money in China than they make in United States because China is the world's largest car market right now.
Right.
But in just the last few years, China had experienced the electric transition, the EV transition. Now more than 50% of the new cars sold in China are electric vehicles. And all the American car makers, European car makers, Japanese car makers, they all got caught flat-footed. And this is why Biden is slapped and later Trump. That's why they're trying to slap on 300% tariffs on Chinese EVs, because they know they will not be able to compete. BYD is making their entry-level electric cars for $13,000 US. I mean, how can you compete with that?
Yeah, how do you compete with that, right? And I guess the answer is you can't. If it was just a straight market, you couldn't compete with it. And that's their issue. That's why the walls are now going up. That's why they're trying to break the world into multiple fronts. I don't think that's going to work, though. I mean, the reality of it is China has been able to create these relationships. China, Russia, and all of these countries that are trying to get into BRICS and trying to get into this idea of we're going to use our own local currencies. Their argument is better. And, in the old days, in the Soviet days, it is an easy argument to make that we're freedom and justice, we're love and light. The Soviet Union is a repressive government. So obviously you want to be more with the love and light government. Okay, fast forward, and you get this argument of, well, we're going to deal with each other as equals. We're going to be nations using our own currencies in regards to trade. We don't believe in sanctioning one another. And we believe in a collective world that is relatively peaceful. And then you get the other argument of we're the hegemon and all of you are vassals. And because we're the hegemon, we should have a world with a hegemon. Okay, well, that argument doesn't work. It just doesn't. That is not a satisfying argument to go to somebody and explain to them why you are better than they are and why they should want a world where one country is better and a hegemon. Like, it is a bizarre argument to make, but that is the argument that we're putting forward. And I suspect that's the reason why much of the world has lumped in on this idea of we prefer to be equals. We don't like these sanctions. We want to deal with each other in our own trade in a way that is not disadvantageous to us. No, that makes sense. That's an argument that works. And I suspect the new world is going to be based on that argument. In the recent summit, by the way. No, go for it, please.
Oh, go ahead. I think you're getting into it. I was just going to bring up the Xi-Biden summit because
that's right. I wanted to go to the meeting.
Xi Jinping address. I'll let you do the intro. Sorry.
No, well, I was just going to go into it where Joe Biden and Xi Jinping meet on the sidelines, and in this conversation, Joe Biden brings up, I guess, the relationship between China and Russia, which again, that conversation is not going to go anywhere. They even bring up nukes, basically saying we need to have human beings use nukes as opposed to having some kind of automated system. Okay, again, that seemed like a gimme, though. Meaning this meeting didn't seem to accomplish anything of significance. But give me a take on this.
I was not even aware there's a discussion of having AI to control nukes. I mean, that's pretty scary stuff. The fact that they're having this discussion is like, what? Were you actually thinking about having AI? You are really thinking about like recreating Skynet, like the Terminator world. I mean, what are you even thinking? But that's what I was thinking. Anyway.
Yeah, it was bizarre. I read that. I was like, wait a minute, where did this come from? I mean, you got the situation where right now the U.S. is allowing strikes into Russia. Russia changing its nuclear doctrine to effectively say, look, if you hit us, and depending upon how you do this, we have lowered our nuclear threshold to allow nukes to be used in a situation where our integrity is threatened. And you get a conversation on the sideline where Joe Biden is weirdly talking about automation or automated nuclear response. It's just bizarre. It's just very strange. What was accomplished at this APEC summit, by the way, if anything?
I don't know what U.S. has accomplished except to provide us with more comedic moments with Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Uh, but Xi Jinping was pretty explicit and blunt during his meeting with Biden, and this is why I'm really surprised by the blunt language, and I'm really surprised by how little this is covered in mainstream U.S. media, because this is what Xi Jinping has said. In summary, this is a readout from the Chinese official site, and it says these are the points, the four big main points. One, there must be correct strategic understanding. The Thucydides trap is not a historical destiny. A new Cold War cannot and should not be fought. Containment of China is unwise, undesirable, and will not succeed. Two, words must be trustworthy and action must be fruitful. A person cannot stand without credibility. China always follows through on its words. But if the U.S. side always say one thing and does another, it's a very detrimental to America's image and damage mutual trust. Xi Jinping is basically saying, America, you are speaking with forked tongues for a long time now. And number three, treat each other as equals. In exchange between two major countries like China and United States, neither side can reshape the other according to their own wishes, nor can they suppress the other based on the so-called position of strength, let alone deprive other of legitimate development rights to maintain their own leading position. Now, Xi Jinping is talking about the U.S. chip sanction to hold down China's progress. Number four, red lines and bottom lines cannot be challenged. As two major countries, China and United States, inevitably have some contradictions and differences, but they cannot harm each other's core interests, let alone engage in conflict and confrontation. The One China principle and the three China-U.S. joint communiques are the political foundation of bilateral relations and must be strictly observed. Taiwan issue, democracy and human rights, development path, development rights are China's four red lines, which cannot be challenged. And this is, by the way, these are bolted in the original Chinese readout. So these are the real important guardrails, most important guardrails and safety nets for the China-U.S. relations. Number five, there should be more dialogue and cooperation. Under current circumstances, the common interests between China and the United States have not decreased but increased, whether in areas of economy and trade, agriculture, drug control, law enforcement, public health, or facing global challenges such as climate change and artificial intelligence, as well as international hotspot issue. China-U.S. cooperation is needed. Both sides should extend the list of cooperation, make cooperation cake bigger, and achieve win-win cooperation. Sorry, I thought 4 points, but there's actually more. 6, respond to people's expectations. The development of China-U.S. relations should always focus on well-being of both people and gathering the strength of both people. Both sides should build bridges for personnel exchange, cultural communication, and remove interference and obstacle, not artificially creating chilling effect. Again, Xi Jinping is casting shade on the U.S. for obstructing the natural people-to-people exchange between China and the United States. Number 7, demonstrate great power responsibility. China and the United States should always consider the future and destiny of humanity, take responsibility for world peace, and provide public goods for the world. Oh, I think
that's not the way we think.
That's a lot.
Carl,
yeah, that's not what we do.
Yeah, that's not what we do. That is not the way we think. We don't take responsibility for world peace. We do not do that. I mean, I can't look over American history and think for any moment that we take responsibility for any notion of world peace. I mean, for God's sake, you're talking about Iraq, you're talking about kill squads in South America, you're talking about trying to overthrow the Syrian government, the Ukrainian war. That is not the way we think. We look at this stuff from what is in America's best interest. And it's not even really America's best interest. What is in a certain elite group in America's best interest. That is not the way we function. And this notion of win-win relationships. Again, look, the fundamental crux of the issue that America always has is that we don't consider other countries as equals. We don't have equals. We have enemies and we have vassals. And so Europe are vassals. They can't even fire missiles without the US assisting in the programming of those missiles in the UK. Like, put that in context, right? And so it's like, we don't have equal nations that we engage with. If a nation is equal to us, that nation is most likely an enemy to us. And then the catch becomes, okay, well, do we at least regard them as equals in the context of enemies? We did the Soviet Union. China and Russia are creating a world where the US will be forced to engage it as an equal. And I think what China's point is, look, when you talk to us, if you're not going to talk to us as equals, we're not going to have anything to talk about. Is the US getting that message? I don't know. And I guess part of the conversation with you is when Trump comes in, Trump seems to be taking a pressure strategy towards Iran, which by definition is going to be a pressure strategy also against China. He seems to have less of a hard-on towards Russia and more of a hard-on towards China. And it seems that he's going to change the focus of America, potentially. I mean, who knows, right? It's Trump. So Trump may get us even more involved in Ukraine because he's coming up with this kind of hubristic points of view. But from your take, I mean, Xi Jinping is right on this issue. At least I think he's right on this issue. I don't know if China, there's a question in America about whether or not China is going to be a hegemon, whether it wants to or not. Meaning, regardless of China saying we believe in win-win relationships, at the end of the day, if they become sufficiently big enough, I mean, for God's sake, there's 1.3 billion people. They are 3 or 4 times our size. If they are able to turn that into industrial might, which they have on some level, what does that look like in 20 years? If China becomes a hegemon, what does the world look like as China's a hegemon? That is something that freaks the US out to no end. And a lot of what the US is doing, either in Taiwan or even, I would argue, in Ukraine on some level, has to do with this notion of we need to undercut China's ability to grow and China's ability to be whatever China ultimately wants to be. From your point of view, is that even possible at this point? What are you expecting for Trump coming in office? I'm just curious. And what is China expecting of Trump coming into office?
Well, Jamar, we have seen this before. We've seen Trump presidency 1.0. He came into presidency last time promising to reset U.S.-Russia relations. I mean, he always wanted to repair U.S.-Russia relations. And he wanted to fight the deep state. Well, guess what? Trump lost. Trump lost the fight with the deep state. He came to office promising no foreign wars, no foreign intervention. Yet he was pressured into bomb Syria, and that's I still remember when Trump authorized cruise missile strike on Syria. CNN anchor was welling up and saying, "This is the most presidential moment for Trump." I mean,
Brian Williams. Brian Williams. I distinctly remember
Brian
that.
Williams.
The light of our missiles light the sky or something like that. He went into poetry as he watched missiles fired from the U.S. kill Syrians. It was the weirdest thing in the world.
And this Trump lost that battle. In the end, he was forced to expel Russian diplomat, send more weapons to Ukraine, and the relationship worsened. And this is what we're seeing right now. Biden is setting up Trump to fail by authorizing deeper missile strike into Russia. I mean, like Trump, and Biden is a lame duck president. I mean, right now, all he can do is further just cause further havoc and damage. You know, we already know he sabotaged the DNC by, after DNC dethroned him, forcing him not to run. We know he sabotaged DNC by anointing Kamala Harris as his successor 30 minutes after he was forced out by Pelosi and Obama. That was Biden's FU moment to the DNC. He knows Kamala Harris is a terrible, terrible candidate. And the only reason he had her as running mate, as VP before is because he knows Kamala is no threat to him. Because Kamala in the other primary, she was polling less than Andrew Yang. I mean, who even remember Andrew Yang? And Kamala was polling less than that. So that was the dark Brandon moment for Biden. And I think he's doing another dark Brandon moment right now by, okay, you know what? I'm going to escalate in Ukraine. And now it's your mess. It's Trump's mess. Like mess for Trump to clean up. I'm signing out, folks. I'm gonna go lick some ice cream. And and this is Trump is set up to fail, basically.
Yeah.
And this is and I don't think
he's trying to do with Trump too, because he's. Yeah, I mean, Ukraine has lost this war, and it's like you lost an election where this was litigated, meaning the American public knew that this was on the ballot, and you lost on this issue. And yet he's doing this nonsense. He's going to escalate either way. I mean, just astonishing. I look, man, this is very dangerous time period between the transition. The first time around, though, I would say that Trump got caught into this whole Trump and Russia stuff that limited his capability of doing anything in Russia. Like, meaning there was no way for him to bring down hostilities because he was in the middle of a lawsuit where they claimed that he won the race by working with the Russians. And so anything that he did was trying to say, no, really, I don't like the Russians. Look at me, I'm passing sanctions. Look at me, I'm firing missiles into Syria. Like, it was bizarre. I don't get the sense, though, that he is going to accept that framing in the way that they did last time. I get the sense that he is very militant this time around in regards to what he wants to accomplish, whatever that is. So,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, one of those things is Iran and China. He seems to have a hard on for China.
Yes, he does. And and by the way, when it comes to the Middle East, there's actually not many daylight between Democrats and Republicans. Either side would be Israel first. Both sides are Israel first parties. Let's face it. And now Iran is one that's always in Netanyahu's crosshair. Netanyahu has said before he wanted to take out Iraq, he wants to take out Syria, he wants to take out Iran. He considers these three countries existential threat to existence of Israel. And
he considers them part of Israel. He considers them Israel.
Yes. People in the United States, many of them don't know. From river to the sea was originally Likud Party's slogan. They want from the river of Nile to the other river, to the river of Euphrates. They claim this whole greater Israel, and that included Iraq, Syria. Of course, they have to go to war with all of them. And then
they want all of it.
U.S. is full on board because people sometimes say, Israel is a tail wagging the dog. But really, Israel and United States are the same dog. It's the same animal. This is why Netanyahu gets standing ovation in the Congress during a genocide. And so Trump is going to go hard on Iran. But you know what? Iran is not Iraq. Iran is much bigger, much more populous. And Iran has powerful friends. People forget during the first Gulf War, the first Persian Gulf War in 1990, early 1990s against Saddam. United States put together George Bush Sr. put together international coalition that included Syria. Syria actually sending a tank battalion to join the United States to throw Saddam out of Kuwait. So, but back then, Saddam had no friends. Soviet Union just collapsed. He had no international sponsor because his sponsor was actually United States. United States just backstabbed him and said, we have no problem with you invading Kuwait. But after he did that, it's like, oh no, we're gonna lay smackdown on you right now. And so Iran has powerful friends in Russia and China. China imports a lot of hydrocarbons from Iran.
It's like 90%. If I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's like 90% of the oil exports for Iran go to China.
Well, maybe from Iran side, because China also imports from the Gulf countries.
Right, that's what I mean. Like the amount of oil that's going from Iran, 90% of the oil from Iran that it exports goes to China.
Yes, because Iran is under sanction by U.S. and its allies. So like
Mhm.
people like South Korea, they would have to get U.S. permission if they even want to import Iranian oil and gas. Whereas
That's
China's like,
mind-blowing.
well,
That's mind-blowing.
we're just gonna buy, we're gonna buy,
Just think about
and
that.
the
You're a
thing is,
sovereign nation, and you have to get permission from another country to import something that is in your country's best interest. That is mind-blowing.
I mean, South Korea is a military occupied country. I mean, U.S. stationed the 50,000 troops there, and then you have, but also Iran is not isolated by any mean. It's connected through Russia through Caspian Sea,
Right.
and there's nothing U.S. can do to cut off that supply unless they have some magical weapon that can zap U.S. Navy into Caspian Sea, which is essentially a lake,
Yeah.
enclosed lake. So there's no way U.S. can cut off the link between Iran and Russia. And similarly, China is linked to Iran through the Iron Silk Road. There's already rail links from China to Iran through Central Asia. So
Right.
there's Russia and China will support Iran. I mean, they will not let Iran fail because they also understand the reason why U.S. going after Iran, because Iran is kind of the underbelly of Eurasia of
Mhm.
this of the BRICS, and so Iran will not be allowed to fail, and Iran will be a much harder nut to crack. I mean, if
Agreed.
U.S. really goes in, I don't know. I really don't know if Pentagon is serious about having a war with Iran because
I don't know. I don't get the sense. I mean, I'll tell you this. If Trump is right and I want to stop wars, not start them, that doesn't stop him, though, from have this mindset that I'm going to pressure Iran. Meaning, even if he's not necessarily talking about a war, he may be talking about some kind of either trade war or some kind of pressure campaign. But I don't know how that works. I mean, the first time around, I always said Joe Biden is the worst president we've ever had. The first time around, Iran was isolated, North Korea was isolated. Both were kind of in their own spheres. And then after the Ukrainian war, Iran was brought out the cold. North Korea was brought out the cold. And not just brought out the cold, Iran started to ingratiate itself closer to China, Russia, etc. The countries in the region. You have Saudi Arabia now that has a tacit relationship with Iran and at each other's throats, all of which are under the umbrella of BRICS, either as a member or as a close associate member. Meaning Trump is coming into a situation that is radically different than the situation he left, where he could work with the Arab states to try to go after Iran. That is not the way it looks currently. And because that's not the way it looks, all of this bellicosity coming out of Trump, I don't know what it means in a real world scenario.
Well, you remember it was Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, that came up with a Abraham Accord, to
Right.
bring the Gulf countries and eventually Saudi Arabia to recognize state of Israel.
Right.
So
Right.
like not then to isolate Iran in particular, to form like an anti-Iran alliance between Israel and the Gulf Arab states, all against Iran. But then China brokered the Iran-Saudi peace deal.
Right.
And then October 7th happened. And there's no way they're going to have further expansion of Abraham Accords. There's no way at this point Saudi Arabia is going to say, "Oh, I'm going to recognize Israel right now because Trump told me to." Because that would be political suicide. That people will be upping arms. So that the Abraham Accord is dead. There's no Abraham Accords 2.0. It's not going to happen. And Iran is already patching up their tie with Saudi Arabia. So U.S. might still try to wedge the Sunni Shiite divide like they always do. But I don't know how much success they're going to have when they're still currently supporting Israel atrocity in Gaza and Lebanon. And that's broadcast all over the internet to the whole world, to the whole Arab world and the Muslim world. And under such circumstances, no Arab government would be seen to have offered friendly overture to Israel and to even align more closely with the United States. I mean, that's just not politically feasible.
That's a non-starter.
So right now, I do agree with you that U.S. will probably adopt a hybrid war, economic warfare, more sanctions. But Iran has seen that all before. Iran has been under sanction by United States for decades now.
Yeah.
They've been on the enemy list since 1979, since Iran overthrew U.S.-backed Shah. So this is nothing new for Iran, and they are already joining new internet. So the BRICS, in a way, is kind of a replacement for all these international institutions United States was destroying. Before Iran and North Korea was left out. That's why they're what U.S. called them pariah states or rogue states. But now China and Russia are putting together a new international forum, a new international institution that includes everybody. So I think, at least rhetorically, Trump will probably be hard on Iran. I would have to wait and see, how that translates into concrete action. I think what we're going to see is more increasing propaganda against Iran. Remember, there was an episode where there was an Iranian woman who had a mental episode. She came out undressed, and then there's all these social media campaign. Yeah, social media campaign and saying how this is a protest against the mullahs and stuff. And her husband was asking us, people, please take down those videos, be respectful. This is not a protest. She's just going to have a mental issue. But all these, NED sponsor activists, that they're posting her videos and making her an icon of resistance. Again, I think there's going to be more of that, probably. That's more likely.
Let me ask you this. I guess this could be the last question. Are you concerned of any kind of flashpoint in Donald Trump's pressure campaign? Are you concerned that this turns from economic into military in any particular way, whether it's in his South China Sea, whether it's on the issues of Taiwan, or do you think, for the most part, no, this is just a continued economic trade war of sorts, this kind of economic escalation of breaking the world into two halves, this kind of Eastern sphere and this kind of Western sphere? What do you think this looks like under a Trump administration for the next, 4 years, give or take?
When Xi Jinping was speaking to Biden in Peru, he was not really speaking to Biden, who we all know is a walking zombie. He's really signaling to Trump, the incoming president. These are the China's red line. Do not cross them, and that's why he's very blunt, very direct, and this is why I don't think there's a big chance of Taiwan blowing up because China has been always very straightforward on the red line on Taiwan. No official declaration of formal independence from Taiwan. That will trigger a war. United States knows this, and government on Taiwan will not do anything without explicit approval and encouragement from the United States. So as long as U.S. has no interest in triggering a World War III, which will for sure happen if they support Taiwan independence, then status quo will likely continue, with U.S. continue to sell weapons. Maybe they will offer rhetorical support for the Taiwan leaders, etc. You will increase they will maintain the tension. The tension is important for U.S. to continue to sell weapons and justify their military presence in East Asia. But I don't think the U.S. Pentagon is ready to touch off a war by open supporting, pushing for Taiwan independence. So that arena is I'm not too concerned about. John Mearsheimer thinks South China Sea is a potential flashpoint. Again, I don't think so, because right now South China Sea we're talking about fishery dispute. Okay, we're talking about dispute over exclusive economic zone, different maritime claims, and so far we have seen how it plays out. Is U.S. is supporting Philippines to push China into a confrontation, and then we see the water gun fights between Chinese Coast Guard and the Filipino Navy supply ships, right? So what's U.S. gonna do? I mean, is U.S. gonna bring the guns to a water fight? I mean, that's so this is why they're having some ridiculous suggestions saying, U.S. Coast Guard also have a role to play in South China Sea. I mean,
Oh,
are they going to
geez.
sell the U.S. Coast Guard to the South China Sea to do water cannon fight with the Chinese water guard? I mean, even if they do that, they're still going to lose because the Chinese Coast Guard has much bigger ships and bigger
Right.
water cannons. It would just
Not to
look
mention,
so
it is in their backyard as opposed to the U.S. Coast Guard. What 4,000 miles?
Jamar, can you imagine the kind of humiliation if United States Coast Guard is to lose a water cannon fight in South China
That would be
Sea? I
horrendous.
mean, that would be the ultimate humiliation. So I don't think that will happen.
Yeah.
And then and so these are two biggest issues that could touch off a war, but I think the chances are small. But I think U.S. will keep on pushing in order to create tensions. They will keep on. We already saw this with the Philippines because China in July they sat down with the Filipino government, said, okay, let's agree to return to our previous gentleman's agreement in 2014, where we allowed the Philippine Navy supply ship to continue to supply the half dozen Marines that were stranded on that ship, and then but you have to promise not to bring building materials to fortify your position. And right after that agreement, like Philippines had one successful supply mission without Chinese Coast Guard interfere. But right after that, U.S. suddenly went to Philippines, offered $500 million in military aid, and then Marcos suddenly reversed 180 degrees and say, oh, like China misinterpreted our agreement, and then it was back on again. So U.S. will continue to do this kind of hybrid war. I would call it hybrid war. Manufacturing of tensions, which justify U.S. stationed missiles in the Philippines, selling missiles to Taiwan, stationing THAAD system in South Korea. Those will continue. U.S. will probably gain more rights to Filipino military bases, etc. But at the same time, Chinese economy is such that all the gravitational pull of Chinese economy is pulling all the ASEAN economy toward China right now. I mean, most of the countries outside the Philippines, they don't want conflict. They want trade with China. I live in Indonesia. Like the lights and the internet are powered by the Chinese power plants north of Bali, and it's powered by Huawei built 4G network. So like here, in all the countries in Southeast Asia outside the Philippines, China is the largest foreign direct investment source of foreign investment. So they don't want to have a conflict with China, and I think U.S. will play these silly games, but it ultimately won't amount to much. This is my prediction.
No, look, from your mouth to God's ears. I don't even like these silly games, but the last thing I want is it to break off into some kind of larger war. Carl, man, always appreciate your take on this stuff, and thank you for the rundown, especially the conversation on the sidelines between Biden and Xi Jinping, because you're right. The U.S. is not going to read the readout for China per se. Instead, they were talking about AI controlling nukes. And I was like, what? I was like, where did this conversation, like in the context of the world that we're in, where the hell did this conversation bubble up where this becomes the thing that they report on, as opposed to what you were pointing out, which was effectively that Xi Jinping read Joe Biden Riot Act. And it wasn't a riot act just for America. I mean, for Biden, it was for America as a whole, even for Donald Trump coming in. These are our red lines. Respect them or else. Carl Jacques, a host of Silk and Steel podcast focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jacques. Follow his podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk In, and subscribe and support their podcast on patreon.com, Silk and Steel. Man, Carl, always appreciate you, man. Thank you for this.